Afghanistan, around 2002. Somewhere beyond Kandahar, an American patrol has reportedly vanished. A second team moves into remote mountain terrain to look for it. Near the entrance to a cave, according to the story told years later, the soldiers find American equipment scattered on the ground. Then a figure steps out. It is said to be nearly 13 feet tall, broadly built, covered in red or red-brown hair. Some versions say it has 6 fingers on each hand, 6 toes, and 2 rows of teeth. It carries an enormous spear. The figure allegedly attacks. One American serviceman is said to be killed. The surviving soldiers open fire. After sustained rifle fire, the creature falls. Then, according to the legend, its body is loaded onto a helicopter or military transport and removed from Afghanistan. No photograph has been authenticated. No body has appeared. No casualty record identifies the alleged dead soldier. No unit report, flight manifest, medical document, or declassified military file has publicly confirmed that American troops killed a giant near Kandahar. But the story did reach an official Department of Defense record. In November 2022, someone filed a Freedom of Information Act request with the Department of Defense Office of Inspector General. The request sought records surrounding an alleged giant humanoid killed in Kandahar during Operation Enduring Freedom in 2002. It specifically mentioned 6 fingers and 2 sets of teeth. The request was entered in the Inspector General's fiscal year 2023 FOIA log as DODOIG-2023-000159. It was submitted on November 14th and closed the following day. That entry is real. It does not establish that the alleged encounter was real. It does not show that the Department of Defense possessed any records about a giant. It does not reveal whether documents were found, whether the request was redirected, or whether the Inspector General simply did not hold material relevant to the request. Still, it creates a striking contrast. A story that had lived for years through anonymous testimony and paranormal media had become specific enough for someone to ask the Pentagon to search its files. The question is not whether a FOIA request proves the Kandahar Giant existed. It does not. The question is whether there is any evidence beneath the legend. The setting itself is real. Operation Enduring Freedom began in October 2001 after the September 11th attacks. American Special Operations Forces worked alongside Afghan allies during the campaign against the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. Kandahar was central to the conflict. It had been a major Taliban stronghold and a political center for the regime. By December 2001, Taliban control of Kandahar had collapsed after fighting involving Afghan opposition forces and American personnel. But the fall of a city did not end the war in the surrounding terrain. Coalition forces carried out patrols, raids, reconnaissance work, searches, and cave operations across Afghanistan. The country's geography mattered. Mountain ranges, isolated valleys, tunnels, fortified positions, and thousands of caves offered places to hide weapons, fighters, supplies, and command sites. American troops had genuine reasons to approach cave entrances cautiously. They could contain armed fighters, explosives, civilians, weapons caches, or nothing at all. The uncertainty was part of the danger. That background gives the Kandahar Giant story a believable frame: a missing team, a remote search, a cave, a sudden threat, a helicopter extraction. But a believable frame is not evidence of the creature itself. The most common version of the legend begins with a missing patrol. Sometimes the missing group is described as a squad. In other retellings, the story becomes less specific. Soldiers find abandoned gear, but no unit is identified, and no disappearance is clearly described. This is one of the first points where an investigator would look for records. If an entire American patrol disappeared in 2002, there might be casualty reports, missing personnel records, official notifications, unit histories, memorial pages, local news reports, or later accounts by relatives and fellow service members. Special operations missions can be classified, and wartime records are not always complete in public view. But a missing patrol would involve more than one secret. Families, commands, administrative systems, and fellow troops would all be affected. No widely accepted documentation has been produced tying a missing American patrol to the Kandahar Giant account. The same problem applies to the alleged soldier killed in the confrontation. Later retellings sometimes refer to him only as Dan. No full name, rank, branch, unit, date of death, burial record, or official cause of death has been publicly tied to the story. That absence does not prove that no soldier died in an incident that inspired the legend. Military deaths occur in confusing circumstances, and classified operations can limit public detail. But the story asks listeners to accept that a service member was killed by an unknown 12-foot humanoid, and that the event left no publicly verifiable trace connected to the claim. That is not a small gap. It is one of the central facts of the case. The alleged body creates an even larger problem. A 12-foot humanoid, depending on its build and estimated weight, would be difficult to move. The people involved might need a cargo net, lifting equipment, an aircraft capable of carrying the load, a landing site, and a destination. If the body were treated as a biological or intelligence matter, there could also be medical personnel, security staff, aviation crews, commanders, logistics specialists, and possibly scientific or intelligence agencies. Supporters of the legend argue that classification could explain the lack of public evidence. Classified military operations are real. Certain special operations missions remain secret for years, and details may be withheld for reasons involving sources, methods, foreign partners, or national security. But classification does not automatically erase every record. It restricts access. It may conceal names, locations, tactics, and operational details. It does not by itself explain how an event involving a dead American service member, an anomalous body, aircraft transport, and multiple military personnel could remain entirely undocumented in authenticated public material for more than 2 decades. The larger the claimed event becomes, the more people and systems it requires. The Kandahar Giant story is strongest as a dramatic sequence. The cave, the scattered equipment, the sudden attack, the spear, the gunfire, the extraction. It is weakest where a real investigation needs it to become specific. Who was there? Which unit was involved? Where did it happen? When did it happen? Which aircraft removed the body? Where was it taken? Who ordered silence? And who can independently verify any part of that chain? Much of the story's modern popularity comes through researchers and media figures already interested in ancient giants, biblical prophecy, and the Nephilim. Steve Quayle was among the major promoters of modern giant claims. Through books, websites, interviews, and radio appearances, he connected reports of unusual humanoids with ancient traditions describing giant beings. L.A. Marzulli later brought the Kandahar story to a larger audience through his Watchers material and related interviews. One widely circulated account was attributed to an anonymous man identified as Mr. K. He was presented as someone with knowledge of the encounter. Mr. K described a massive red-haired humanoid emerging from a cave and attacking American soldiers. In the story, the entity kills a member of the team before the others shoot it. The body is then removed by the military. The account is detailed enough to be memorable, but the witness's identity has not been publicly established in a way that permits independent confirmation of his service record, assignment, location, or direct role in the alleged event. That does not automatically mean the witness invented the story. Anonymous witnesses can have legitimate reasons to withhold their names, particularly when discussing military service. But anonymity changes the evidentiary value of the account. A listener cannot verify the witness's access. An investigator cannot compare the account with unit records. Other participants cannot be located through the witness's identity. Claims of secrecy cannot be tested against an established chain of command. The same limitation applies to reports of a pilot or aircrew member who supposedly transported the body. No publicly identified aircrew member has supplied a verifiable service history and documentary account of moving an enormous humanoid out of Afghanistan. The timeline is also important. The encounter is generally placed around 2002. Yet the story became widely recognizable much later, especially in the mid-2010s. That gap does not eliminate the possibility that soldiers told it privately for years. Military stories often circulate informally through units, veterans, families, and online communities. But the gap raises a serious question. Can the story be traced to verifiable soldier accounts before it entered media circles focused on giants and Nephilim? If it can, the case changes. Early, independently documented accounts from people whose military service can be confirmed would establish that the narrative existed before its most famous promoters helped shape it. If it cannot, another explanation becomes stronger: that the Kandahar Giant developed as modern folklore, using a real war and a believable military setting as its foundation. Military folklore is not necessarily a lie. It is often a way people process dangerous and confusing experiences. Every major war produces stories of ghosts, strange lights, impossible survivals, mysterious enemy fighters, secret weapons, cursed locations, and creatures said to live beyond the edge of the map. Afghanistan was particularly fertile ground for such stories. Its mountains were unfamiliar to many foreign troops. Its caves carried real military danger. Operations could be physically exhausting, heavily restricted, and difficult for outsiders to reconstruct. Rumor could move faster than paperwork. A frightening encounter with an unknown person, an animal, an ambush, or a battlefield. Death could become something larger as it passed from one teller to another. The Kandahar Giant's physical description may show that process at work. Extreme height, red hair, 6 fingers, and unusual teeth are not random details. They resemble features that appear in older giant traditions and modern alternative history claims. Red-haired giant stories have circulated in North American folklore and fringe archaeological narratives for decades. Many are poorly documented or depend on repeated claims without identifiable remains. 6 fingers are not, by themselves, evidence of another species. Polydactyly is a real human biological condition in which someone is born with additional fingers or toes. Extra teeth can also occur through abnormal dental development. Those facts do not establish that a 12-foot creature with 6 digits and 2 complete rows of teeth existed in Afghanistan. They show why individual features can feel plausible, even when the combined description has no verified specimen behind it. The Nephilim interpretation takes the story further. Genesis contains a brief and deeply debated reference to the Nephilim. Numbers describes Israelite scouts reporting large inhabitants in Canaan and refers to descendants of Anak. Deuteronomy includes traditions about large peoples such as the Rephaim. David and Goliath remains the most familiar biblical giant narrative. Some modern researchers argue that these traditions preserve memories of an ancient population of unusually large humanoids. Under that interpretation, the Kandahar Giant could have been a surviving Nephilim, or a descendant of a giant race isolated in a remote mountain region. That theory has an understandable appeal. Giant traditions occur across many cultures. Afghanistan has its own Persian, Central Asian, and Islamic folklore involving powerful beings, supernatural figures, and jinn. Remote mountains can feel like the kind of place where an old story might survive. But cultural parallels are not biological evidence. Afghan, Persian, and Islamic traditions should not be automatically equated with a modern American military legend. Nor do biblical passages establish the existence of 12-foot supernatural humans in the present day. The key question is whether the Nephilim connection was part of the earliest account, or whether it was emphasized after the story reached researchers already focused on biblical giants. That distinction matters because an interpretation can shape a story as much as a story can support an interpretation. Then there is the Department of Defense FOIA entry. It is tempting to see an official log and assume official acknowledgement. But a FOIA log is an administrative record of a request. Government agencies receive requests concerning alleged secret programs, disputed incidents, historic mysteries, UFO reports, and extraordinary claims of every kind. Listing a request shows that someone asked. It does not show that the agency confirmed the premise of the request. DODOIG-2023-000159 was closed quickly. The available log does not explain whether responsive documents were located. It does not show whether records were withheld. It does not establish that the Inspector General conducted an investigation into a giant. It may simply indicate that the requested material was not held by that office, that the request was administratively closed, or that another process occurred outside the information available in the log. The unresolved administrative question remains useful. A more complete investigation could seek the disposition letter, if one exists, and ask whether requests were submitted to other components: the Army, Air Force, United States Special Operations Command, Central Command, or agencies that may have held relevant operational records. Even then, a no records response would not conclusively settle the legend. Records can be incomplete, misfiled, exempt, or outside a particular agency's holdings. But neither would the existence of a request prove the story. The Kandahar Giant remains a case built around a real military environment and an unverified extraordinary claim. It is established that American forces operated in Afghanistan's remote terrain after 2001. It is established that caves and mountain positions were genuine operational concerns. It is established that Steve Quayle and L.A. Marzulli helped spread modern giant claims and the Kandahar story. It is established that anonymous testimony became central to the legend. And it is established that a 2022 FOIA request asked the Department of Defense Inspector General for records about the alleged event. What is not established is the encounter itself. There is no authenticated body, no DNA, no verified image, no identified casualty, no confirmed missing patrol, no named and independently verified primary witness, no after-action report, no verified flight record, no publicly authenticated classified document. A future discovery could change that assessment. An original operational report with a verifiable chain of custody. A named witness whose unit assignment and participation can be corroborated. A casualty record that matches the account. A contemporaneous photograph with established provenance. A flight log tied to an unusual recovery operation. Or biological evidence that can be independently tested. Until then, the story can be approached in two ways. It may be a concealed encounter, remembered by people who believe they saw something the public was never meant to see. Or it may be a modern military legend, shaped by a real war, dangerous cave missions, anonymous testimony, biblical giant traditions, and the powerful human tendency to carry a story farther than the evidence can follow. The cave, the missing patrol, the red-haired figure, the spear, and the aircraft all remain claims. The FOIA entry remains real. The war remains real. The giant remains unverified. This has been The Conspiracy Files with Paige Carter. Follow the show so you never miss an episode.